Well, in breaking news this morning, pretty disgusting news to report 7 burglaries or ram raids in a crime spree in Christchurch overnight. This came through from Christchurch Police a short time ago. The burglaries were reported at nearly 3 o'clock on St Terrace Road, another one on Sparks Road in Hallswell, 3:15 in Wigram, Hopkins Road in Woolston, 4:30 a.m. in London Street in Littleton, in which a vehicle was used to gain entry. But wait, there's more. 5:15 a.m. at Bassett Street in Burwood, a vehicle was used in that attack. 6:10 on Cuts Road in Russley, in which a vehicle was used to gain access to the premises. Police said in a very short statement. They didn't say if there's any description of the offenders. Of course, inquiries are underway, including working to determine whether these incidents are linked and to locate the offenders. Anyone with information is urged to contact police. So yet another disgusting crime wave in Christchurch City overnight. To respond to that is National Party Leader Christopher Luxon. Christopher, you've heard the news just then. What is your reaction?
Oh, that's absolutely shocking, and it's horrific, isn't it? I mean, this is the state of New Zealand in 2023. That you have 7 instances like that in a very short period of time over a place in a place like Christchurch is just unacceptable. And this is the problem, right? We either start to accept that this is the new normal, and it just gets worse every 6 months, more frequent, more gratuitous violence, and we just learn to live with it, and that's unacceptable. That's why I've been saying for the last year and a half, no, we've got to, back the police, tackle the gangs, have serious consequences for serious young offenders, have tougher sentencing, and certainly in this case of ram raids, let's stop young people filming them as well and putting them up on social media and make that an aggravating factor in sentencing as well. So, to be honest, Chris, I try and spend at least once a week, if not every second week, time with victims of crimes just like this. And you go talk to the people that are in those businesses. They've worked their butts off to try and get the deposits for those businesses. They're doing everything right. They've taken 2 or 3 jobs to afford to get into those businesses. They then pay their taxes. They get their kids to school. They do everything right, and they get treated like this. So it starts at the top, frankly. It's a government soft on crime, as we've talked about before.
Well, it is a soft on crime approach, isn't it? Because some of these offenders will probably be on the rooftops of the Justice Facility in Rolleston in a couple of weeks' time demanding KFC and McDonald's and getting it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make it up. And I lived in Chicago for 6 years, and I watched a city that particularly Southside Chicago, that's just you just get a deterioration in crime, and it just goes on, and you don't think it gets any worse, you don't think it can get any worse, and then lo and behold, there's something else going on. So it's the same thing here. We're just starting to accept in New Zealand now that this is a reality of daily life in New Zealand, and we don't have to accept it. I mean, we shouldn't be accepting it. We need to get people to understand there are rights as being Kiwis, but there are also responsibilities. And I'm sorry, but we are going to make serious interventions in these young people's lives, and we will put them into military academies to turn their lives around, so they actually have serious consequences for it. But they know about consequences, they know about rights and responsibilities, and they have some discipline, because clearly they're not getting that in their home lives and where they're growing up. So yep, but this is it's just unacceptable, utterly unacceptable.
As I've said to you before, some of the mothers and fathers who I've spoken to who are the parents of these ram raiders, they're calling out to the government, they're calling out to police saying, send our kid to military camp. It's the only thing that's going to get them to stop this. But of course, we've got a government here who says, no, we'll have wraparound support and probably give them KFC. Anyway, I wanted to move on to something else that was on a list of things I want to discuss with you today. Equally as concerning, if not more concerning in some respects, a burglary at a Horswell dairy over the weekend, where young offenders raided this dairy in front of the mother, who was one of the shop owners, and her 2-year-old daughter. They both were forced to flee their own dairy. I mean, literally fleeing for their lives, for safety. She trips over, injures her foot, manages to escape while this burglary continues. They are teenagers, but what I've been told, they are still haven't been arrested by police. This happened over the weekend. We're talking about they don't care if there's a child in the shop now. I mean, it doesn't get much lower than that, Christopher.
No, it doesn't. I saw your story, Chris, and I thought it was an excellent story. And I also saw the end of that, where the husband said that his wife now didn't want to go to work anymore, and didn't feel safe. And when you saw her trip over with the 2-year-old, and fortunately the 2-year-old wasn't hurt, but the fact that she was, it is unacceptable. And what's happening here, Chris, is these young people don't understand consequences. I don't even think they think about the woman and the 2-year-old. They just don't care. and it's been the way that they sort of think about life. And that's what we've got to reprogram them around, because I'm sorry, but when they don't understand the pain and suffering that they've just caused, and the trauma and the anxiety and the stress that's in that family now as a consequence of that, just think about that family going into that workplace each and every day. That comes up for her as she sits behind that counter and goes about trying to be, to run the store. She's constantly reminded as she moves around her own workplace of that event. It sits with her forever.
One of the top police officers here in Christchurch often says he rolls out the same pre-script that he does for everybody. He did it at the Chamber of Commerce. He's done it with me. He's done it with other media. He says it's just a small cohort of teenagers that are committing this crime, as if that's some excuse. Now, while that may be the case, it may be a small cohort of people committing this crime, but they are having huge consequences on the rest of society in Christchurch. It may be just a small cohort of people responsible for the 7 crimes overnight, but what they have done has caused enormous pain. I feel
Absolutely.
like the officer's downplaying it by saying it's just a small cohort. Well,
Yeah.
is it to say big deal?
Yeah, well, if it's a small cohort, let's get on top of them and let's actually make the intervention that we talked about. So let's be clear. You've got sort of the wet bus ticket sort of family group conference, which this government's favoured a lot as a remedy. Already on the books, you can do home detention with ankle bracelets. You can already do community service, and you can already have juvenile youth facilities that you deploy as well. So, there are those remedies already available. We want to create a serious young offender category for judges and add the military academies for 15 to 17-year-olds for up to a year. But there is lots of remedies. Let's be clear, and the government's got to choose some and actually make sure the consequences. And actually, if these are repeat serious offenders, which they will be, then let's actually make the intervention and actually make sure they properly get serious consequences for it. I mean, and then because the point is, why are we subsuming the rights of every other New Zealander who has to endure all of this stuff, the victims, rather over these young people? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, public safety matters. People feeling safe and not feeling scared, which is what happens for New Zealand. That's how New Zealand's feeling at the moment, and rightfully so. It's outrageous. The 7 events he just talked about as breaking news. I mean, that's phenomenal. Yes, I mean, I don't really care, but we have to make the interventions and we have to get the consequences right for these serious young offenders.
Let's discuss National Party's policy released over the weekend to try and at least fix up some of these potholes. David Parker was very quick to say, well, the funding was cut or at least frozen under National. Is that a bit of a weak excuse, or is there some truth in that, why we are still looking at potholes now?
No, it's a bit of a weak excuse. This government's actually had a 27% less maintenance work done on the actual motorways and the state highways. What's happened is that the state highways have been run into the ground. And actually what we're saying is, look, there's 54,000 potholes across New Zealand. That causes huge damage to freight and to motorists, but also we need really high quality roads so that we can actually move around and do our business, obviously connect with each other socially. It's a critical piece of New Zealand's infrastructure. And frankly, whether you're in an EV or whether you're going to be in a hydrogen truck in the future, a good, strong roading network and a safe roading network is important. There's a lot of money being spent in the NZTA budget that we think, frankly, isn't a good use of time. When it costs $330,000 for a single speed bump to be put on a road, that also is actually, would actually repave and reseal a whole almost a kilometre of roading. So, the money's going into the wrong places, and we're saying we're going to reprioritise 500 million of it over 3 years and actually make sure that money, that maintenance money, is actually spent on road maintenance, not actually the maintenance budget today, which actually has other things in it, like property management and other things. So, that's what we've got to do, because, Kiwis are experiencing it everywhere. Our state of our roads have never been this bad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, every time I talk about the roads here in Christchurch, people on the east say fix the roads on the east, and we're still waiting for some of those roads to be properly fixed or resurfaced or redeveloped following the earthquakes, which is kind of disgusting, really. But unfortunately, Waka Kotahi is giving lots of money to the council on this drive to slow everyone down to 30 k's an hour. We're removing lots of lanes and putting in cycleways, and that's all very good, and there's nothing wrong with making sure that our city runs smoothly and people are safe. But when the priorities seem to be a bit muddled, I think that's when the community starts to get frustrated, because they may be redefining and putting in a bus lane down here, but over on the east, they're not fixing the potholes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. I mean, there's just some dumb things going on, and the money's being spent on the wrong things, and it's actually slowing people up, and it's actually making daily travel harder. When surely our job is to make life more convenient for people, so they can get around their daily jobs in a much better way. Yeah, you've had some perverse outcomes down there with respect to cycleways and slowing traffic down. But I mean, look, they want to slow traffic down to 30 kilometres in the cities. They want to move the state highways down to 80 kilometres. I look at the Waikato Expressway, I look at the Kapiti Expressway, I look at the road north up from Christchurch up to Rangiora now. Good, safe roads, well built, well designed, and that they work so well. I mean, the Waikato Expressway is 110 kilometres. It's 10 kilometres, as a legal limit, and it's the fastest and safest road in the country. So, that's what we should be focusing on, building and making sure we develop right.
I agree. Christopher Luxon, good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Great to be with you, Chris.